I was born in Russia. I was born technically in USSR, as I like to say lately. And I moved to the United States, to California in 1992. So I was 11 years old. So I was already living in what is called Silicon Valley, although that term is somewhat nebulous. But I lived in San Francisco Bay Area.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Sylvan.
Alex, a very well welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
You're the co-founder and CEO at Sunflower Labs, a remote autonomous security solution for all types of properties. And before we talk about your company, I actually want to start with your personal background. You studied astronomy and sociology. That's quite an uncommon combination. How did that happen?
By accident, I guess. My general philosophy is that what you study doesn't matter. So I think a lot of people take that much more seriously, especially in the undergraduate. I wanted to study what I found interesting. So I actually didn't really declare a major. I just took sociology classes, astronomy classes, meteorology classes. And after a little while, I realized that I was closer to, essentially, I was close to getting both degrees. And if I was to focus, I can get both degrees. Technically, so I do have both degrees in both bachelor degrees, but then I also completed the astrophysics honors program. So I finished that. So for the most part, I was actually angling to be like focusing on astrophysics. Like I did apply for the master's. I actually got accepted. So I was going to be an astrophysicist, but then I went to Silicon Valley and got a job and never thought about it again.
And things changed from there onwards.
Yeah.
I want to focus on the claim that you just made before. I find that very interesting, that the studies don't matter as much as many people think. Why is that? What is then really the relevant aspect from your perspective?
I think the main point of college and really of any education is to teach you how to learn. So what you are learning isn't as relevant because you basically are learning how to learn. Because honestly, the way I've seen people's careers develop is that whatever they studied essentially was already out of date by the time that they were, especially in startups, right? Especially in sort of high tech, right? Yeah. You can't take computer science classes and then expect to get a job in 4 years and have any of that be relevant, right? But the general understanding of learning how to learn a language, how to program it, even if you're learning, Pascal or some sort of forgotten language, that's still relevant, right? So if you were good at learning, right, it'll be easier for you to learn new things as you go on. And I think in particular, undergraduate studies, people sort of over-index their importance because undergraduate studies, you're a little bit too young to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life, I think. So you should just study stuff that you find interesting and then sort of boil it down, eventually get to something that you will, want to pursue as a career, but give yourself a chance to explore.
In that regard, would you say that it's even a good idea to pursue studies at all if you want to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I think an entrepreneur is somebody who is constantly learning, right? There's no way, you will learn everything you need in school and then go start a company. And at every stage of the company, you're learning different things, right? So fundamentally, the only important thing is that you are a quick learner, right? That you know how to find the information, you know how to study, you know how to absorb it. And then I think that would be the most fundamental skill.
No, I like that. And then you mentioned you went to Silicon Valley and things changed. So how did that interest and also sort of pivot into the business world happen then from your study background? What spoke and caught your attention there?
So I was born in Russia. I was born technically in USSR, as I like to say lately. And I moved to the United States, to California in 1992. So I was 11 years old. So I was already living in what is called Silicon Valley, although that term is somewhat nebulous. But I lived in San Francisco Bay Area. I was working in some high-tech companies early on. As a matter of fact, I was the youngest employee at Silicon Graphics. I was 17 years old, and I had a full-time job at Silicon Graphics in 1997. And then I decided to go off to college to do something else. But essentially, I started a company my second year in college with my roommate. His name is Chris, who's the co-founder of this company now as well. So we actually had a company together in 1999,
Wow,
I think,
yeah.
something like that. That was our first. And we did, web development, hosting, we did email blasts for people, whatever kids did in those days to make money. And so that already, I already felt that this is going to be my path. My father is also an entrepreneur. He's had numerous companies throughout his life. So I saw that path as well. And then when I had a chance to, when I graduated college, I actually had 2 job offers. One was in Boston and one was in California. Mm-hmm. And long story short, but because of a girl that later became my wife, I ended up going to California and I ended up taking the job in California and then essentially then building my career there.
Wow, that's a fascinating story. I mean, you put in a short story, but that's a lot of stuff happened there. You then actually also spent 9 years at Evernote, right? We already had Phil on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, from your time there, I mean, it's a fantastic project. Phil talked deeply about it. What did you take away? How did these 9 years at Evernote shape and change you?
In more ways than I can describe. So Evernote to me was really the full experience of sort of going through conception of a product, early development, building out a team, dealing with, early financing, launching a product, scaling a product, building out the company, building out partnerships. I was officially employee number 3 at Evernote.
Wow.
And when I left, I think there was about 400, maybe 450 people. And just the work which I did, the work that my team and I did was responsible for something like pre-installing Evernote on 250 million devices around the world. So it was just, it literally went from zero to, we launched with the App Store and all of the things that happened to then being, this very massive, very successful product. I believe it was actually 10 years I spent there. So I left in the end of 2015 and I started in 2005.
Okay, well, even longer, yeah.
Yeah, so it's my decade of my life.
And you didn't have enough of the startup world because then in 2016, you founded Sunflower Labs. You already mentioned one of your co-founders that you met during college. How did you met the third co-founder?
Yeah, so technically it's 3 of us who really built the company. Mm-hmm. So Chris and I were friends from college days and we stayed close throughout those times and we wanted to do something together again. We talked about it on and off. And when we decided what to do and we decided to do something in the drone space, we quickly realized we didn't actually know anything about drones. So we needed somebody who did. So through a mutual connection, we were introduced to Nick. Mm-hmm. And Nick joined the company essentially before we had an office, before we kind of had anything. I think he was, working with us on a part-time basis initially, but, we basically said, look, we think we can raise money for this. We think this is a good idea. We can do a bunch of this stuff, but we really need somebody who's an expert in drones. He was just finishing ETH. He was an expert in drones. He worked in a PX4 lab. And he agreed to join us. And the 3 of us effectively built the product and the company that we have today.
Was it always the goal at Evernote for you and then also Chris to say, hey, we want to start another company together?
No, it wasn't necessarily always the goal. Chris and I were friends, for 20-some years, and he was also at other startups because he's an aerospace engineer and he was more an aerospace company. I was more of a kind of a high-tech, mobile sort of guy, and I was those types of companies in Silicon Valley. He was looking to do something new around that time. I was looking to do something new. I come to Switzerland quite a bit. My wife is Swiss, so he is Swiss as well. So I saw him here. We said, hey, we really should think about doing something together. And so, yeah, it worked out that way. But, that wasn't necessarily the goal in itself.
So it was more also the timing that aligned, that you were both looking for something new and the timing was right to get started together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think both of us ended up in bigger companies that we wanted to be in, and we wanted to be in a small company again.
Then build it yourself. That's the way to go. Yeah. Talk a bit about the early days, how it actually started with Sunflower Labs, the idea around it, and also the focus on drones. Were you just dissatisfied with the existing security solutions out there, or did you come up with the idea?
We say that's maybe a little bit more of a PR or marketing spin on it.
Right.
That's not entirely how it happened. I guess I might as well sort of tell the story how it actually was.
Sure.
So I wanted to do something new. Chris wanted to do something new. We sort of threw ideas around. Essentially, we end up having about 5 ideas of things that we could do. And they range from something quite trivial, actually there's like a game, like kind of a simple game, to sort of a B2B software that might still come into existence through another friend of ours who might pursue this project. There's one other project, and then the fourth in complexity was the idea of having a drone autonomously patrol your property. And the reason for that was because I lived in this house in California, and I had a forest behind my house. And there was constantly noises inside the forest. Some of it is just animals. Some of it are teenagers partying. There's a bunch of other weird stuff that happened. And it was just kind of unsettling. And there is nothing you can sort of do. Like, you're not going to go out there in the middle of the night into the forest, like with a shotgun or something. Like,
yeah, right.
I mean, it's not me. I wouldn't do that. And my wife was quite worried about it. And she would wake up and she would say, hey, what was that noise? And, like, you peek out the window, you don't see anything. And so I was, at that time, I had a couple of like commercial drones. And I thought, it would be kind of cool if I just like flew out and took a look. And I literally just mentioned this kind of off the cuff to Chris, thinking that like, oh yeah, it would have been kind of cool. But he took it much more seriously. And he was thinking about it more than I did. I, meanwhile, moved on to the 5th idea, which is something we hopefully will eventually get back to. But we had this whole other idea of space garbage collection. So I wanted to be space garbage man. Most editors want to say I'm a garbage man, and then explain to people. So that was the premise of the idea. But we had some concept about how we would do space garbage collection. But we thought, okay, that would be too difficult. So the 4th most difficult idea was this one. Chris, meanwhile, started prototyping it. He had kind of an early. We had these sensors. We had this kind of early drone. This is when we realized we didn't know much about drones. We were building these racing drones together. This is when we met Nick. Nick saved us. And I basically said, look, I like this idea. Let's see if we can raise money for it. We went to Phil. So Phil was our general catalyst at the time. I talked to Phil about the 5 ideas. Actually, I think he liked one of the other ones better. But I said, no, we want to go with this. We pitched a few other folks as well, but then we pitched Phil and we pitched General Catalyst. And essentially they agreed to fund the initial kind of pre-seed round. And then once we had that, we were like, oh, well, I guess we're doing it. So then we started working on it, for real.
That's such a great story, because I think it shows the personal connection, right? It is a personal problem that you faced yourself to a certain extent, but then also sort of more, this might be an idea, not taken serious at the beginning, and then a whole business idea and even a business emerged out of that. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, when we talked about it, we realized that there's quite a few different markets for it. And this is actually, we initially wanted to focus purely on residential. And we were, most of our time, we built the system for residential applications. But pandemic and some of the other reasons, we essentially realized that, look, there's actually a much larger market, much more viable market in sort of commercial and industrial aspects of it. And because we built a system with the residential market in mind, we were already building it to be more compact, more portable, more flexible. We sort of built it with a kind of a consumer mindset. And that ended up helping us a lot, because our system is arguably sort of the simplest, the most elegant, yet, I think is arguably just as powerful as anything else in the market.
Yeah, it looks stunning. I recommend everyone to check out your website. It looks super nice.
Please do, yeah.
So tell us also a bit how it actually works. So what is the problem that you solve for these larger clients, the commercial properties?
Yeah, it's very simple. It's a flying security camera. Like you want to see what's going on in different places. You have, broadly speaking, 2 options. You can walk out and go look at it, or you can put a stationary camera and look at it. So putting stationary cameras is expensive. It gets expensive quickly. They have to be mounted. They have to be wired. They have to be integrated with some sort of a video management system. Typically that is a big project, and that could run into hundreds of thousands of dollars, in a deployment. Or if you are patrolling it by yourself, right, then you have to hire security guards. It has to be 24 hours. They have to walk out. They have to know that something has happened. Right. And then, so we sort of can solve both of those problems at once. We can give you a point of view of anywhere on your property within seconds, quite literally within seconds. So we can cover a 4-acre property, and that is, roughly speaking, 200 meters by 200 meters in under 30 seconds. So we can be anywhere on that property in under 30 seconds. Wow. We can cover a 10-acre property, and so that's 600 meters by 600 meters roughly in under 90 seconds. So that is orders of magnitude faster than a human would do it. And then if you were to think like take take a large yard construction site or something, how many cameras do you actually need to cover it comprehensively? You're easily in dozens very, very quickly. So then, with our system, you just have the one, and it can go to each one of those points. It can capture video. It can capture snapshots. It can analyze them for people, for vehicles, for animals. It can follow them around. It can do a patrol. It can be on demand. There's all this flexibility when you can just fly there, right? And of course, in the end, comes back, lands, recharges, ready to go again. So we think it's actually a very compelling solution for a very, very real problem.
Yeah, it sounds like an even better solution at a fraction of the price of a traditional setup. Is that correct?
Yeah, we estimate that for kind of a commercial site, our cost of our system is less than 20% of what traditional security system providing the same job would be.
Yeah. And how difficult is it to win clients to, make a case and sort of convince them that, hey, this not only saves you money, but it's also the better solution for your setup?
There's two types of clients, I would say. There are people who instantly get it, and you don't need to sell them. They want it immediately. And it's a question of tactically, how do you deploy it? Right. Right now we're working on a fair amount of regulations that we need to adhere to and so forth. So there's work to sort of deploy it. And then there is a slightly different approach where you are talking to security providers. And these security providers, they have a need to reduce their staff, reduce their costs. Excuse me. And then that's a little bit of a longer, because you really have to show the effectiveness of the system, as they would deploy it and reduce sort of the staff that they have. So we see quite a bit of both. One is just a longer route than the other one, but I think people, for the most part, the value proposition is clear, right? So either somebody is like, oh, we want it, we understand, this is exactly the kind of site that would be perfect for us, we need to have this here. Then it's just sort of working out the details, or you're really kind of working more through a business case, doing proof of concept installations, putting together reports and so forth. So we do a little bit of both. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it certainly is doable and has been going quite well.
Which of these customers do you focus on? Do you go directly to the property owners, or do you go to the security companies who would be mandated by the property owners to take care of the security aspect?
So we're honestly only been dealing with inbound interest.
Wow, okay.
So we haven't knocked on doors, or we haven't really done any type of outbound outreach very much. We mostly have been just very lucky, I guess, that we've been sort of well known already in the space. We're easily Googleable. So if you search for drone security, I think we come up right away. We've had really good press. People were quite excited about us, so that helped drive it. So we are mostly dealing with inbound interest, and the question is just being able to having the throughput to be able to deal with it. So we've had to sort of narrow down to what we think would be the most suitable types of applications of our system and just go through them one by one.
What are the top 2 or 3 application?
Storage is a very big one. Any type of storage. So we do self-storage, sort of just large outdoor storage. We have a partnership with Swiss Federal Railways, with SBB, where we have done an installation to protect sort of a large train repair facility. And you can imagine that's a really great use case, right? That's this massive site, right, that you can be able to patrol quite easily instead of having to install, in our case, probably hundreds of cameras, right? We work with the largest security company in the US called ADT. And so we're working on a number of projects. Can't get into a lot of details yet, but we'll certainly make some noise about it when we can, but we had our system installed at an airport, but not at an it's a big airport, it's an international airport, but we were not operating what's called a movement area, so not where planes land, but more on maintenance facilities and facilities sort of on the outskirts of the airport, which are maybe harder for security to get to. And we had sort of full FAA authorization to do that. Wow. We have a number of other partnerships, but basically think large outdoor properties. And by the way, we have done some high-end residential installations. So really big, like mansions, essentially, where our system flies around. So things like that.
These are fascinating and very interesting use cases.
It's been a lot of fun. And we try to illustrate as many of them as we can on our website when we can. We can't always talk about what we do because we provide security and people are quite sensitive about it. Yeah. But when we can, we put out a case study on our website where we show how our system is used in a particular site.
And I also wonder, how does your business model work? Do you have like an installation fee or do you work with a recurring fee?
It's also quite simple. You give us money, we give you drone. So that's the gist of it. You can give us money in number of ways. You can give it to us as a subscription. So we actually, most of our customers lease the system. That allows us also to maintain, upgrade it, replace it. So, we don't expect a drone that lives outdoors to live forever. So you want to essentially replace it on a fairly regular basis. We also don't want customers to have old drones laying around, right? Somebody had it for many years that maybe it's not as safe anymore. So we think a lease model allows us essentially, it's a robot as a service, right? You need a robot to fly around your property. You got it. Our pricing is quite simple. It starts at about $3,000 a month. So you have $3,000 a month, you get a drone, and then we make sure it is always working. We do have other alternative ways. We've sold some systems with 2 or 3 years of service included. Money-wise, it ends up being the same thing, but in some cases, some customers prefer to account for the finances differently.
And often entrepreneurs on the podcast, they say us, do either hardware or software, but never both at the same time. You sort of do both at the same time. You combine hardware and software. Is that a very big challenge from a complexity level to make it work?
I can't see how you can possibly do hardware and not do software anymore.
Yeah, right.
As a matter of fact, I think you're probably shooting yourself in the foot, right? There's a phrase, I think it's by Alan Keyes, I might be wrong, that said that people who are serious about software build their own hardware. And like that phrase has never been more true than now, right? If you want to provide a certain experience, that experience is defined by software, right? Whether it's the app or the backend or the cloud or anything, right? But then if you want that software executed with perfection, exactly how it needs to be, and have the control over it, then you have to build your own hardware, because anytime you are doing it on somebody else's hardware, you are restricted, right? You don't quite have the full control. So, unless it's completely open source or something like that. So we build everything. We've done design, industrial design, graphic design of our system, everything that we need. We've done hardware design, we've done electronics, we've done most of the firmware. Yes, some of the firmware we use, for example, PX4, which is developed here in Switzerland. So that's an open source project, but we contribute back to it. So there's lots of stuff that you stand on the shoulders of giants, right, in terms of sort of software development. And then we build our front-end apps as well. So the philosophy is that you control the end-to-end experience for the customer, right? If somebody says, I want the drone to look over here, there are many, many steps that happen, and you are responsible for every one of those steps. And if you say, oh, we're not going to build our own drone, we're just going to take somebody else's, and then that drone, you don't know what it does or it misbehaves and you don't quite have the full control over it, you're at the mercy of that supplier, right? Yeah. So, I can see companies who only build software. They don't need to build any hardware, and there's lots of great businesses there. But I feel like if you build hardware, you inevitably have to build your own software, at least the critical components of it.
Right. But I can imagine combining both worlds, right? Hardware and software. That's an immense complexity to work with and to actually make it work in the end.
It's work. Work is work. You have to do the work to, write up and stuff. But it's maybe less mysterious too, because you could spend a lot of time debugging somebody else's hardware. You wrote great software, but it doesn't work, and you don't know why.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So if you have the full stack control, it is better. I think most folks at the company at Sunflower Labs, they sort of span both worlds. Even people who are largely hardware oriented, they still understand what the firmware is going to do, and people who are purely software still understand that it comes down and you need to get a signal at a certain frequency from the hardware. So I think everybody has an appreciation of both sides of it. And I think that's also essential, right? I think the appreciation of the full stack of what you're doing lets you ultimately make better decisions.
Right. In that regard, I also wonder, you briefly mentioned your wife is Swiss, one of your co-founders is Swiss, but Switzerland is also known as a sort of a drone hub. There are many drone-related startups here. What role does Switzerland play for your business?
Well, that's why we started the company in Switzerland, honestly. Yes, my co-founder is Swiss. Both my co-founders are Swiss. My wife is Swiss. They all wanted to be in Switzerland. I wanted to start a company. We met a whole bunch of different folks here in the drone space. I'm really close friends with a bunch of them. You know, the founders of Wingtra, the founder of Arterion, Lawrence was actually one of the first people that we met, and introduced us to founders of Photokite, you know, also a drone company here. We met them in 2016 when we first started the company, really just to gauge whether, everybody talks about Switzerland and drones, but is it true? Mm-hmm. And it is. There are, at my last count, there are 50 drone companies in Switzerland. Maybe there's even more. Wow. And there's a lot of talent that's coming out from ETH, EPFL, University of Zurich, with a lot of experience in robotics and control theory. And so it felt to us that for starting a company and building out the initial team, we had a larger pool to tap into. And actually, what I felt was a very positive thing is that there was more, there were fewer startups here than, say, in Silicon Valley. So the kind of people who want to be in startups, it was easier for you to be exposed to them, right? So whereas in Silicon Valley, everybody's in a startup, it's not really a thing, right? So when we decided to do it, we explicitly decided that we were going to start it here. We will obviously have a presence in the US. We are an American company. We raised money in the US. We have now, there's 3 American employees, and most of our sales and most of our activities in US. But Switzerland has been our main office and the biggest office. So we have 27 people here, and it has been what we generally consider our R&D office. So all of our kind of technology and innovation takes place here.
Wow, I think that's a really interesting setup to better understand. So R&D in Switzerland, probably sales and marketing more US focused. Production-wise, do you also have a third office or pillar in the world?
We are going to do production in Switzerland. Wow. So yeah, we decided to pick the most expensive place to build your things, but there is a reason for that. So I can't get into too much details of it just yet, but we'll make this public soon. But we were exploring where to do production. You know, everybody kind of defaults to China. Mm-hmm. It would actually be very difficult for us to do production of our system in China. We decided, okay, let's look into a few other places. We looked into US, Eastern Europe, and so forth. We accidentally found a place that had a facility in Switzerland, which happened to be very well suited for us, that we're going to start the manufacturing there. But the real reason for that is so that the engineers can drive over there. Because if you do production somewhere else, especially in the early days, it's so hands-on. You have to be so close to it. Otherwise, imagine it's on the other side of the world. It's a 24-hour cycle to get a question answered. Everything is slow. Right. So we thought, you know what? The engineers are here. There's a great facility that we found here. Yes, it's more expensive, but our system is expensive, and it needs to be high quality, and it needs to be something that, we do want the made in Switzerland sort of stamp on it, right? Yeah. I think that does add a significant value to it. Over time, as production grows, we can scale it out into different parts of the world. But for now, yeah, we are going to manufacture here.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think speed outweighs the cost by far in that setup, especially in the early days, as you just mentioned.
I was convinced at the following sort of metric is that the cost of a mistake, right? Mm-hmm. A cost of a mistake and the ability to recover from a mistake, right? So if you let things go, you haven't been at the facility for a long time, and then there's been a mistake that's been kind of propagating for a couple of months, right? The cost of that mistake to you could be immeasurable at that point, right? Whereas I think having a local facility and saying, oh, we have an issue with electronics, okay, send the electronics guys to take a look. We have an issue with mechanical assembly. We have an issue with, I don't know, the firmware isn't doing something right. Being able to be quick to respond, to address an issue and not let them sort of fester and go deeper into production is what I think is ultimately the reason. The more expensive part of building in Switzerland is the labor, but the labor is a fraction of the cost of our system, because really the cost of our system are largely the parts, the electronics, the microprocessors, and all of the computers and everything that go into it. So we thought, okay, well, it actually greatly outweighs that formula.
Great setup. You mentioned the advantages of Switzerland, right? The good talent pool, the universities, the local drone community, and other startups. I wonder, you've lived in Silicon Valley for a long time. You've done business there. What are some of the drawbacks or points where Switzerland can do better and maybe learn from the US in that regard?
Okay, I have to be careful here. I think the bureaucracy is probably one of the bigger drawbacks. Like, I feel that anything that we have to do here that's sort of kind of on the legal front, there's just a lot more paperwork and there's a lot more complexity to it. I honestly, okay, fine. I mean, if I'm going to say anything useful, I feel that Switzerland isn't made for startups. It's made for large organizations, large companies, banks, insurance companies, pharmaceuticals, things like that. The regulatory environment is complex and strict in order to allow for these complex products to be produced and distributed, and it makes sense for them. But I think some of that spills over into starting a company. And like, as somebody starting a startup, it should not be as difficult as it is. To give you an idea, like, when I started this company, we started in US. I did it one night at 11 p.m. We decided to do a company, and I went and I filled out like a form, basically, and I had, the next morning, I essentially had everything I needed. I had the company registration, that was $200. I had like all the basic stuff. Then I could open a bank account, and then we did this sort of in parallel with a fundraising just to pull together. Right. It took no effort whatsoever. It's easy to open the company. It's easy to shut it down. So I think that's sort of the beauty of sort of the Delaware C Corp. Mm-hmm. And we then decided to do the company in Switzerland. And so we were like, okay, well, what is that going to take? Several lawyers later and like 9,000 Swiss francs later was like, oh, it needs to be set up as a wholly owned subsidiary that's owned by this entity that is then submitted here, that's registered in the canton of Zurich, but maybe we should do it in Zug for some reason. Maybe we should do it like it got, and then you needed to have all of these like internal contracts and all this employee stuff. And okay, granted, fine, it's an international thing, but that experience wasn't unique to me. Like, I thought like, that's because I'm trying to do something crazy and start a company in the US with a Swiss entity. But that's not crazy, right? That is a simple thing that actually a lot of Swiss companies choose to do, especially if they want to raise money in US, right? So raising money in US is where most companies will ultimately raise money. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to a lawyer here, and I said, why is this hard? Like, what is the point? And he's like, yeah, this is not like, the legal system isn't made for this. Like, the legal system is made for large law firms, working slowly for stuff. So I found that challenging. Getting audited, like, we were 10 people and we had to go through an audit. We're like, wait, what? Like, we don't make any money. Like, what are you auditing here? But again, like 7,000 francs and 2 months of like paperwork. And it's like, why? What are we doing here? Yeah. Hiring and firing people, way more complicated than it should be. I understand, again, if you're a big organization, you have rules and you want to retain people and give them job security. But that's not quite the case for a startup that can just vaporize, right? You might run out of money, and like, the 90-day notice or longer. And it's just like, that's not really conducive to sort of that environment, right? So those are my major sort of, issues which I had.
Yeah, I think it's great to get that outside perspective, because here in Switzerland, sometimes we tend to get a bit too comfortable and think it's a great place, everything is working, but it's good to see where we have some homework to do. So thank you for sharing that.
Everything is working once you set it up, but it takes time. It takes time. Yeah.
And I mean, you have other tasks and challenges at hand that actually create business value. So you don't want to waste your money and energy and time on these bureaucratic things.
Like setting up stock option plans for people, getting tax advice on like, what does it mean? It's just stock option plan. Is it taxable? Is it not? Like, we literally would get conflicting advice from people, and, some people. And so it just felt like, look, all of this stuff should be trivial. Yes. Like, if Switzerland is interested, and Zurich maybe specifically is like interested in having more startups, like, and I think I've said this to folks that from the canton of Zurich, actually personally, it's like, just make it like absolutely trivially easy. Like fill out this form, couple days, 300 Swiss francs, whatever, done. Like just like don't make people who are starting a company, who are likely really good engineers, right, have a really cool idea, don't make them have to figure that stuff out. That's not what they should be spending their time on.
Absolutely. And Zurich, as an example, is going the exact opposite way these days. So when I talked to tax advisors last week, they basically said Zurich is one of the most strict cantons when it comes to employee stock option taxes. So whatever they can, they will probably do it in a negative way for you, while other cantons are more startup friendly in that regard.
Yeah, like we were told, like, oh, you shouldn't start it in Zurich, you should do it in Zug or Schaffhausen or something like that. And it's like, wait, why would I do it there? Like, we're already here, right? And it's like, oh, it's like 0.5% better in tax. I was like, well, we don't make any money. Like, so like, what is this? Like, what are we optimizing for, right? It's like, it's silly to, but anyway, yeah, like make it absolutely trivial, and then there'll be more companies coming out of college and starting and ultimately being more successful.
Yeah, I would love to see that happen. I also want to talk about the Founders Network that sort of emerged from Evernote. Phil Libin and also two other Evernote folks are actually on your board of advisors or have even invested in your company. So in that regard, how important was this founders network of people you've worked with together in the past? I mean, even Chris, your co-founder, was sort of part of that. What importance does that network play to then build another successful company after that?
I mean, it's fundamental, right? Your network is essentially, it's an asset, right? So why was I able to raise money earlier? Well, it's because Phil and some of the other folks that invested early on, they knew me from before, right? They trusted me. They listened to the idea. They thought it was crazy, but yeah, what the hell? Let's let them try it, like roll the dice with it. Why were we able to, so we have our legal advisor, Chris Dahl, is on our advisory board, and I've worked with him in Evernote from day one. We've done something like 400 contracts together, right? Wow. All different kinds. And so I knew, like, look, if I'm going to start a company and I need some legal advice, this is like absolutely the one person I want to be able to be close with. Another person on my advisory board, his name is Hitoshi Hakamura. He was the chairman of Evernote Japan. So when we started the office in Japan, he was the person that essentially made that possible. And I wanted to do more business in Japan. And we do business in Japan. We have our systems deployed in Japan right now. And I thought, you know what, like if you have like one person in the world that I know that can help me with anything in Japan, it's going to be Hitoshi. And some other folks as well. Phil, of course, has been a friend and a mentor, and continues to be my boss. He's on the board now, so I could never escape that. He likes to say that he's the final boss. So I feel it's probably true. He's probably the final boss. But yeah. And that is an invaluable relationship because any type of advice, right? I can reach out to him and to the other folks. Other people that I've worked with who have now started companies or have good connections, it's great to just reach out to somebody. It's been now 6-7 years since I left Evernote, to reach out to somebody. And it really is like you didn't skip a beat. You remember each other so well. You trust each other. Any type of advice you might ask. Right. So I think building a network, maintaining a network, right? It's also your reputation in network, right? So I did a lot of partnerships. I did a lot of business development at Evernote. I can go to any one of those partners and they know they can work with me. They know they can trust me, right? But if you maybe weren't as good or weren't as ethical, that network is gonna backfire on you. So I think that's sort of your life's work, right? You build out, the folks that you would want to work with in the future, to stay close with in the future, with their friends or coworkers, and that will help you in everything.
In that regard, I think it's a quote from Naval Ravikant that comes to mind. He basically said, everything compounds, also personal relationships. And in that regard, that seems to be exactly what's happening here. Is that a fair analogy to take?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you also raised a total of 15 million from funds, over 2 rounds, I think, in total. So what makes investors particularly interested and excited about Sunflower Labs?
That's sort of the opposite of the right question, right? The question is like, why is it that some of the people I pitched did not invest, right? I don't know. It's my experience is that the more progress we've made in the company, the harder it has been to raise more money, because I think people love the crazy idea more than they love the reality of how much more work there is left to do before this becomes a profitable sort of like enterprise. And so we were somewhat easier for us to raise money earlier on. I mean, our seed round ended up being a little over $6 million altogether. And our A round, which we closed sometime last year, ended up being about 9 million, but that took just an order of magnitude more work to do, right? And then you would think it's the opposite, right? It's like our seed round, we had nothing. We had a prototype, a pitch deck. And our A round, we had a working system and track record and interested customers and pre-orders and a bunch of other stuff, right? But I think then it came down to like much more practical sort of concerns and considerations. And then it just became tougher and tougher. So the people who invested into the company, I'd like to believe that they invested because they trust us, they trust the team, they see the potential for this product, they see the potential that we as a team can deliver this product, right? They've seen us through the past 6 years, or at the time whatever years it was, and that this is sort of where it's going to be. The investors that I hope to reach in the future, I think, would be much more, they will see the track record, right? They will see the sales, the production, the certifications that we received, customer testimonials and so forth. So I think you switch from selling a vision to detailing your successes in the past, right? In order to convince the future investors. So that's kind of where we are right now, right?
And this is quite mind-boggling to understand, right? Because the first time you raise a round, I often think that this is the easiest to raise because people are excited. They believe in the vision, as you mentioned. You haven't built anything yet, but they see the potential. And then later down the road, you have all the problems. You have to change course sometimes. You still deliver, of course. You still execute and show progress, but things change. And you also have much more challenges to communicate. Is that really a fair assessment to say the first round is probably the easiest to raise?
I'd say so, yeah.
Okay.
In my experience, the first round you raise basically on the founders, on the idea. Yeah. Then your subsequent round you raise on some traction, some product, product market fit, things like that. And then all of your subsequent rounds you raise on actual track record of your sales, your projections, sort of your pipelines and things like that.
So to go back to your question that you wanted to ask, why did some investors that you pitched the case to not invest? What was their feedback?
Oh God, I've heard every excuse in the world. I even had at one point I had a word cloud of excuses.
Oh wow! What were the top words that you saw there over and over again?
Too early. This is, and I find that this is the worst one, right? It's like, oh, it's too early for us, and it's like, so you believe that we'll be successful, but it's too early, meaning that you would rather invest later. I don't quite understand the logic there. So, but I understand if it's too early, okay, we invest, when you IPO, okay, fine. But, I'm not talking to those investors. I'm talking to people who do early stage rounds. So too early is always it's a weaselly one. I don't really like that one. Or some of the other ones. Well, okay, so some legitimate ones, sort of like regulatory concerns, right? So, we would like this to be approved by FAA. Would it to be so? Sure. And then those are those you can sort of wave your arms around and say, look, it's possible. Some of the companies have gotten this and that, but the truth with drones and regulations is that it's kind of a moving target. It has not solidified at all. As a matter of fact, the U.S. regulations, European regulations, and Swiss regulations are all slightly offset from one another. They're all slightly different in different ways. So, that's not a good place to be, right? If you're building products at scale. But they are converging. It's just taking its time. So, okay, fine. I can understand how people say, you can build an amazing product. You've built an amazing product. We love it. But can you really deploy 1,000 of them? You could do it as proof of concept project, you do an evaluation project, which is essentially what we've done, to date. But can you deploy it at scale? And so we're only we literally just recently got some of the FOCA authorizations and EASA authorizations that we've been seeking for, and there's been a lot of work to get them. And now we can breathe a little bit of relief and say, okay, we have a product, we have a technology, we have our manufacturing lining up, and we have the regulations clearing our way. So that it's finally sort of like getting aligned, so you can then go big right after that. But okay, so that's a legitimate concern. Like product market fit, there are certainly funds that will look for you to have traction in a particular industry. They understand how to scale that. That's a legitimate concern. Concerns that people have that you're building hardware. So Silicon Valley investors don't really like hardware. B2B software or crypto, although crypto's probably dead now. But B2B has always been sort of the sweet spot. They can understand how to scale it, how to grow it, how to measure it. So like there's a lot of folks that do investment into that. Hardware, I mean, I think there's probably like 20 funds which I could name out of 500, right? Which like specifically do hardware, right? Some of them accidentally do hardware a little bit, but like ones would specifically do hardware. They're not that many. They're harder to get to. And then I'll say one other thing. When we went to raise money, one of the things that happened is a whole bunch of like drone companies essentially folded right before that, like relatively big ones as well, like 3DR, right? So 3DR was like the darling of sort of the drone space. Like DJI was the biggest one, but 3DR was kind of up and coming. And we were raising money one of the rounds, and it was like right on the tail of 3DR, just essentially like imploding, and after raising $99 million. Lilly was another one, right? That he raised, I don't forget how much, but they like raised a ton of money, and so we were like out there raising money, being like, no, like that's not, not everybody's like that, but you talk to these investors and they just lost this, and they're like, yeah, I'm not touching this anymore. So we went into this hype cycle, and then we went sort of quickly out of that into the trove of disillusionment. And now I think we're actually slowly coming back out, where you can see very specific, very vertical use cases for not just drones, but kind of robotics in general. And now you can see that they're really being applied. You can see how they're really sort of, penetrating the market. And I think we're sort of back in a good place in the market with drones and with robotics in general.
Yeah, certainly an exciting future ahead.
I hope so.
So you also mentioned when we talked about the ideas that you were evaluating, one of them, getting rid or taking care of space garbage. Now you're working on drones and disrupting the security environment for larger properties. What will the future bring for you? What will you focus on between these two ideas, where you will eventually get to the space garbage one day, maybe?
I want to do progressively more complicated things. So I have done, in my early days, I did web development, and then I actually had a hosting company, kind of like cloud infrastructure company, before cloud was really a thing. Like we were sort of providing cloud services, doing some custom development integration. Then I joined Evernote. Evernote was a lot of things. Evernote was, obviously software, like desktop software, mobile software, backend software, synchronization algorithms, technology to recognize and process images, integrations with third parties. We had a massive API and kind of a whole app store of products. We did hardware integrations. We built a scanner. So that's actually one of my projects as well. So we built a scanner with Fujitsu, with Evernote deeply integrated. I still use it. I still think it's the greatest scanner ever. And, fine, I'm biased, but it is. It's the greatest scanner ever. It's never been on like that. We built a few other pieces of hardware. We even did a little bit of furniture. So there was a time with Evernote where we had this kind of a marketplace of stuff, and there was even like desktop furniture to organize it. We did a partnership with 3M, the guys that make Post-its, in order to automatically recognize when you took a picture of the Post-it, extract text from it, make it a note, make it look like a nice kind of recreation of a Post-it. I was super proud of that project. So we did all of this stuff that really kind of broadly touches, a lot of your life. And then I wanted to go, when I started this project, I felt that, this was kind of stepping it up even more, right? I've always been fascinated with robotics. I've always wanted to do something in that space. I was a fan of drones, but I wasn't kind of an expert in drones. And I thought, it really does feel like there is a lot that this product, this technology, right, can offer. Like DJI did everybody a huge favor, right? DJI essentially showed that drones are reliable, that drones are safe, that drones are relatively inexpensive. They're quite flexible to do. And, they build good hardware products, but I think there's so much more of experience you can build around it, right? I almost compare it to like there were cell phones before the iPhone, right? And so that's like kind of the DJI product is like sort of like a Nokia, in my mind. But then like you can take that same technology and just build a much better experience out of it, right, on top of it. And that's what I think a lot of companies doing in Switzerland, a lot of companies are doing around the world, kind of building again on top of that existing knowledge and understanding of what drones and quadricopters specifically can do. So I will do something more complex. I hope to do something with space. That's always been the goal. I mean, I did study astrophysics. I might as well use it. The space garbage collection is a cool idea, although there's been 3 companies since then that launched with a similar mission. One of them by Steve Wozniak, of all people. So Steve Wozniak has a company that does space garbage collection. So he is now the space garbage man. So I'll come up with something else. It's okay. I have other ideas.
Where does that idea come from, or that hunger even, to really always go for something more complex, for something more difficult, for something harder? Is that just ingrained in your nature, in your DNA?
Well, it's like if you play a game, right? Like you're not playing the same level over and over, right? You want to level up. You want to play the next level. So I want to play the next level. I'm not sure what the next level is at this point, but it does feel like something in space is definitely, maybe that's not like the next level, but like 8 levels from now. So we'll get to that. Where does it come from? I don't know. I think, I don't know. It's a form of masochism, I guess,
I see. Alex, to wrap up today's conversation, we have some rapid fire questions for you. So I either give you different options to choose from or a single question you have to answer in one sentence.
In one sentence, okay.
Or try.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
First one, do you have a drone surveying your home?
I did. I sold it. That's a short answer.
That's fair.
I will have one against it.
Okay. Switzerland or the United States?
For what? For skiing? Switzerland.
For business?
United States.
Yeah, fair point. When was the last time that you changed your mind on something important?
All the time.
All the time?
All the time. Like, all the time. Yeah, I am not as stubborn as, I'm not stubborn, I don't think. Yeah.
Product or sales?
My passion is more product, but now I am essentially sales. So like I had to shift my mindset from product to sales this year.
How do you personally keep the balance between everything that is going on all the time as a founder?
I don't know that I do. I try my best. I don't have a good answer to that.
That's fair. In one sentence, how did Evernote prepare you for Sunflower Labs?
In every possible way. I couldn't possibly enumerate it. I tell stories about stuff I learned at Evernote, all the time.
No. And the last one, what's your favorite part, what that you enjoy the most of building a business?
The people I work with. The people I work with, I would build a different business with. I will do something else. I will go to space with. Like it just feels like having a team you can trust, a team you can rely on. You can just walk through walls.
Alex, I think that's the wonderful sentence to end the conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. All the best and lots of success.
Thank you so much as well.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.